Welcome to our Natural Habitat Adventures daily dose of nature, bears, bears, and more bears. Our presenter today is Brad Joseph. He has been a career naturalist guide with NatHab since 2004. He has a degree in wildlife biology from University of Alaska Fairbanks, and he designs and guides trips all over the world, including Alaska, Borneo, China, Africa, and snow leopard expeditions in India. His main mission throughout his career has been to promote wildlife conservation through responsible ecotourism. And today, he's here to tell us all about bears. Brad, welcome.
Hey guys, wow, thank you so much again for watching. Once again, I think this daily dose of nature webinar series is an awesome way for the guides who right now obviously aren't being able to work to reach out and keep doing what we love, which is teaching, and especially for homeschool kids or people that really kind of want to remember nature during this whole time. So thanks again. We've done a lot of webinars on bears. I guess bears are pretty much you guys' favorite topic. That doesn't surprise me at all. It's such a huge topic. There's 8 species in the world. So next week I'm going to do kind of a deep dive into polar bears of Hudson Bay. We've done one on sun bears. It was amazing. Did pandas in China last week. So, but there's a lot of topics and things that we've kind of having to leave out. So right now, I was just going to do one on some of the topics and interesting things about bears that we haven't talked about yet, and talk about a few more of the bears of the world. So we'll get started. So to really understand bears, you have to understand their main motivation in life. And bears love to eat, and they eat high quality foods because they have a simple predator stomach, just like we do or like a dog does. So really every bear that's out there in the world is food is an obsession. And I think that the obsession that bears have with food is more dramatic than it is with any other animal, really. Because one of the interesting things about bears is they have a very specific specialty that in areas such as these pictures are for coastal brown bears in Alaska, and that area where we run our trips out there on the coast of Katmai are the coastal brown bears, and that is the most bear-dominated ecosystem on the planet, where bears are everywhere and they rule. And the reason is because they are very, very, very good at making use of a big influx, a seasonal food source, get fat off that food source, and then they have an incredible ways of using their fat reserves to get them through the times where there's no food available, like during the winter. So for the Alaska Peninsula bears, they have it made. They've got the salmon. So that's the best example, really, of kind of bears at their best, which is these brown bears that these salmon will begin running depending on which river system where you are, but maybe for the ones where we are, usually it's around mid-July, and they don't really get going good until early August. Then they peter out by mid-September. So just during that like 1.5 month period, these bears can gain 30% on average of their body weight, which is phenomenal. I mean, humans could never do that, even if you paid them $1 million, I don't think. So they're able to gain so much weight in a short period of time. But they also, right now we're just going to go through kind of some of the different bears and how they survive and what food sources they like. Those bears of the coast also do very well when the salmon are not running, when maybe a beached whale washes up. They are very, very good at making use of so many different kinds of food sources from the ocean, like in the intertidal, such as flipping rocks over for small fish, snails, different crustaceans, digging clams. So that's what the bears are, the brown bears. Now polar bears, and I'm going to skip over most of this and talk next week about polar bears. But they have adapted themselves to make use of this incredible food source that other land mammals have not been able to access, which is seals using the sea ice as a hunting platform. And they're very, very well adapted for that. So that's another great example. When the sea ice is there, the bears can hunt seals. Seals are extremely high in fat, and they can put away a lot of pounds in a short period of time. But other bears, more obscure bears you guys might not have heard about, such as the sloth bear, and there's the range map. India and Sri Lanka. They live in the national parks where you will go to see tigers in India. So if you're lucky, and this last February, I saw my very first sloth bear in the wild, and I was so excited. Really incredible. I'll close the window. But what you'll notice, and one of their favorite foods is termites. And if you go to a tiger national park in India, you see lots of termite nests. So they have this special adaptation. And I'm going to use my mouse here. And you see that that bear didn't get its teeth knocked out right there. Those teeth are actually absent for a reason. That is a tunnel so that they can suck termites out of their nests when they make a hole. So that's pretty incredible. So that's the sloth bear. There's another awesome bear named the spectacled bear, which I'm sure you guys are not, so nobody really is that familiar with them because they're so rare due to habitat loss. But they live in the Andes and different mountains in South America, from all the way from Colombia down into Bolivia. And they're the spectacled bear. And here's a picture of a wild spectacled bear. And I just wanted to give a shout out to this guy who's super cool, Sean McHugh. Sean is a wildlife biologist who specializes in a lot of tropical ecology. So go to his Instagram site, and it's one of my favorite Instagram sites on Instagram. I love his stuff. I mean, he's got jaguars on game cameras, stuff that nobody else has. And he's got really the most wild footage of these spectacled bears. So go give Sean McHugh Wildlife a visit and check that out. So the cool thing about spectacled bear that blew me away was its pictures were sent to me by a friend of mine, Chris Morgan. These spectacled bears, they really struggle to get much to eat, but they have to. One of the things that they do is they like to eat this inner bark of these trees that grow in cliffs. And just check that out. I don't even have to say anything. Look at the challenges that these bears will face and the risk in order to get food. They become rock climbers. So I mean, those pictures blew me away. I've got to get down there and check out spectacled bears. Look at that tub. I mean, if those bears fell, they would die. This is a huge cliff. And they're able to scale it like Spider-Man and climb down into the trees and get that access. Pretty awesome stuff. We've already done a great webinar on sun bears with Dr. Wong Su Tae. And so you can always go back and look at the recorded webinars that we've already done. But sun bears have special adaptations for them to get their favorite food, which is, well, they like fruits, probably their favorite, but for insects. So these long tongue and long claws in order for them to dig in to the termite and ant nests. Here's another bear we haven't talked about at all, actually. This is the moon bear, Asiatic black bear, and it is another extremely endangered bear. And this is a picture of the first, but not the last. We've seen a lot of a wild moon bear from a nature reserve in China, where we go to on our China trips. I was so excited to see this, my first wild moon bear. Look at this big Mickey Mouse ears and this big mane they have. I think that's because they evolved with tigers and kind of help protect them when tigers attack bears from behind, which they do in Asia. Tigers are tough characters. Here's another picture of the moon bear. This one is from Dujian Panda Base. It's a panda breeding center, but they rescued these two bears. I think they were injured by poachers, and so they live in this rescue center now and can kind of show themselves off and to the Chinese people that go look at them and they get a better respect for them. The reason they're called moon bear is that moon-shaped crescent on their chest. One of their cool adaptations, they like to eat nuts, like walnuts, chestnuts, wild kiwis. So they get up in a tree, and it's not really comfortable to be up at the top of a tree. And if you want to rest, why would you want to climb all the way down? So if they see nuts on the branches of these trees, they break them off. They pull the branches back in, eat all the stuff off the branches, and instead of just discarding it and throwing it onto the ground, they actually build a nest, which is a nest, like a feeding platform. So they can snooze comfortably, wake up, eat a few more nuts, snooze, and it's very, very much more efficient. I'm going to go on a little side tangent here that I haven't been able to talk about yet. I want everybody to know is that a lot of people know that bears are targeted a lot by poaching. And the reason why the poaching is so bad is the poachers are going after bear bile. It's ursodeoxycholic acid. And what that is another specialty that bears have to utilize the food sources. And because a bear is a predator, but it's a predatory stomach, but most bears in the world eat mostly vegetation. And vegetation has a lot of toxins in it. That's where all, plant poisons called alkaloids. So what the bear bile is specifically set up and evolved to detoxify these poisons. So it really is a medicine, and people actually can use it for certain things like kidney stones and some liver problems and things like that. Well, unfortunately, the bear bile market has caused tremendous poaching pressure for all the bears. So what we're trying to do now is you can actually synthesize bear bile. This is exactly the same thing. It's just not the wild stuff. So everybody needs to kind of understand that, spread the word that it's not worth killing these bears over. And the bear in the cage, that's from a bear farm. So to make money, these guys will basically put a bear in a cage, put a catheter in the gallbladder, and then we'll milk it for the bile. So that's bad stuff. But I just wanted to kind of mention that. And Animals Asia, I'm sorry, is the leading fighter in the war against bear farming and bear bile and bear poaching. So this is a tool for those bears all over the world to get that high quality food so they can make use of it. And their sense of smell is 2,000 times better than humans. That's 10 times better than a bloodhound. So they are incredibly good at finding the food. So that's a very, very, very amazing. One of the reasons why their sense of smell is so amazing is there's something called a Jacobson's gland, or vomeronasal organ is another name for it. And it's an olfactory gland, and we all have it. Everything has it. Like we have one, but they're not very well developed. Well, bears have a very, very well developed Jacobson's gland, or vomeronasal organ. So this is interesting behavior. So you see my mouse, as the air goes in, it gets smelled by all the nasal passages, which have nerve endings, which carry information in the green to the brain to tell, oh, that's sweet, oh, that's fish, oh, that's whatever. But then so they gather information one way, but then they will breathe out the air, and it will pass through the roof of the mouth, past the vomeronasal organ, and they'll get a special, different way for them to gather information to send it up to the brain. So. And bears are also incredibly intelligent. So once they learn how to get food, they're very good at figuring out what's to eat, what they like, where is it going to be, how can they get it in the future. So that's very much helped by their amazing intelligence, which is similar to the great apes when it comes to figuring out food puzzles. An incredible memory as well. This is kind of a complicated thing, and I could do the whole webinar just on the cycle. This is a life cycle of the black bears of Arkansas. So this cycle is similar to all the bears, but it really depends on where that bear lives. Everyone's going to be, the timings will be different, but this is just wanted to kind of show you for their search for high quality food, they set up their entire life cycle based on when the food's going to be available. So mating season, which I'll talk about at the end, really is something that takes lots and lots of energy. Mating season. And so they don't want to waste time where they could be eating great food during the mating season. So what they do is they mate in the spring, right when they come out of hibernation. If you think about what a bear eats, bears like to eat stuff that we like to eat. So they're all across their whole range. It's going to be, and for Alaska, it'll be salmon that come in usually later in the summer and the fall. It'll be roots. When we dig our root crops, our beets and our potatoes, that's in the fall. Well, there's wild things like that the bears eat, wild roots. That's in the fall. Berries, nuts, all this sort of things. So they don't want to spend a lot of time and energy doing mating season during this period. When you'll notice where it says hyperphagia, that basically means overeating. And bears will get into this hyperphagia stage when the food's available, where they basically become obsessed with eating, and they just eat as much as possible. In order for them to gain weight so quickly. So basically the mating occurs early on, and then the embryo actually doesn't implant in the uterus until November. So they're timing because what they want to do is have their cubs born when they're nice and safe in the den. That's obviously the best place to have newborn babies is once you've hibernated. But they don't want to gestate for that long, so they delay the implantation. So what happens is the eggs get fertilized, and they turn into a zygote, and they don't implant in the uterine wall until after the hyperphagia period, the eating period, is over, if and only if she's fat enough. So imagine if it was going to be a bad year for salmon or berries or whatever it was, if she mated and then she immediately starts to gestate in the early summer. Well, what if she's already spent so much energy gestating these babies inside? Well, maybe that's going to tip it over to where she doesn't have enough food for herself or the babies. So they've got a great system where if she's fat enough, her body knows that. It'll go ahead and implant and begin gestating. And if not, it'll just reabsorb and she can start and try again next year. So really, it's just it's a really cool adaptation that a lot of animals have, but it's basically just timing their breeding season so that it doesn't interfere too much with their seasonal food supplies. So hibernating. Well, bears don't actually truly hibernate. They go into a process we know as torpor. And so a true hibernator would be like an Arctic ground squirrel, and their body temperature goes all the way down to the freezing level, and they cannot wake up until they get warm again. It's almost like a cold-blooded animal. I mean, you have to warm them up to wake them up. Well, bears aren't quite like that. When the food runs out, they go ahead and they put their body on a metabolic pause, but their body temperature only drops about 10 degrees. And their heart rate drops to about 10 beats a minute. So they're definitely really, really asleep. But what they're doing is they're putting themselves on a metabolic pause, not because they don't like the cold. It's just there's no food there, so why not live off my fat reserves the most efficiently as possible? And the way they do that is they're running on their fat. And so they don't have to drink anything, because when they metabolize the fat for their calories, one of the byproducts of fat metabolism is water. And you break up those hydrogen bonds, and it's easy to make your own water. So they don't need to drink. Well, they don't need to urinate because they're only making enough water for themselves. But here's something fantastically cool about hibernation. So when your body does work, your cells do work, it's much like a car engine that runs, and it's going to produce several byproducts. One of them is your car will produce energy, it will produce heat, will also produce a toxic byproduct, carbon monoxide. Well, our cells do the same thing, except instead of carbon monoxide, it's lactic acid. And we have to get rid of that, or else our body becomes toxic. Well, if a bear is not urinating, our way of getting rid of our lactic acid is converting it over to urea. And that's how we don't just pee. Animals don't just pee only to get rid of excess water. They have to pee to get rid of that lactic acid. Well, bears will take that lactic acid, reconstitute it biochemically back into amino acids. That's phenomenal if you think about that. And then the hibernation process is also phenomenal because they don't have any muscle atrophy. So if you were to go into a coma for 6 months, like a bear does, and your muscles would be so, you wouldn't be able to get out of bed. Your muscles would be trashed. But bears will keep themselves in shape by doing these kind of electrostatic, flexing process. So it keeps their muscles toned up. So really, bears are just the ultimate animal to make use of a high quality food and then get by. Now, you think about polar bears. This is a good reason why, bears aren't hibernating because they don't like cold weather. They're hibernating because there's no food. Well, polar bears actually do not hibernate because in the wintertime is when the food's available. That's when the ice is out there, and that's when they can hunt seals. So they're active all winter long. But polar bears, one time that they do go ahead and use that classic den behavior are the pregnant females. And I will talk about that more in depth next week. But they will make a den and hibernate like other bears will when they're going to, if and only if they're having cubs. So bear cubs are born very, very, very small. That's why it's great. When they're in the den, it's no problem. Mom's curled up, they're buried underground. They just crawl out. They're blind, they're helpless, they're hairless. They're absolutely just teeny, useless without mom. And all they have to do is just kind of wake up and crawl up to the teats and start nursing. The reason why they're so undeveloped, think about like when a deer is born, in 3 days it can outrun a wolf. Well, the bears don't want to develop much in the uterus because that's part of their life history of living on their fat reserves. They want to raise those cubs mostly on their fat stores because it's easy for bears to store fat. They can't really store protein. In a placental pregnancy, like our 9-month pregnancy where we develop more, or in mooses, which is about, I guess, over the entire winter where the calf comes out really well developed. It isn't, that's very taxing on protein. So bears basically have these teeny cubs so that they can raise their cubs with milk, which is easy to do making milk off their fat reserves. Their fat is about 30% rich in, their milk is 30% rich in fat. And that, if you compare that to human milk, is only 3% fat. And cow milk is only about 6% fat. And I guess just to show, I mean, marine mammal milk is actually the highest, 50% fat. But bears have 30% fat-rich milk. And that's how the cubs are able to grow so fast. But just imagine how much calories this takes. It's kind of cool. You'll see this female at the top right. That is the same female as the other picture, but 1 year later. So the big fat one, this one, that was in September, and I know it's the same bear, just trust me. And she had a whole year with no cubs, and she was able to basically almost double her body weight and store up all this fat. She was so fat. The next year, after having a cub that was born at Christmas time and was, ran around through the whole summer, that's the cub. Looks really healthy with a nice little pot belly, but look how small mom looks in relation to how she looked that same period of time the year before. So that just shows you the cost of producing these cubs. Moms have to go through a lot. So one of the things that makes being a mother bear so difficult is something called infanticide. And it's a really kind of a brutal thing, but being a bear, the world of a bear is brutal, and you have to understand what they have to go through in order to appreciate them. So bears, bigger bears will kill anything they can that's smaller and acts like prey and runs away. So if it's a beaver that's kind of like stuck trying to waddle to another reservoir or something, or a river, bears will catch it and get it. If there's a seal that's stuck in the intertidal, they see it's vulnerable, they catch it, they kill it, they eat it. That's what bears do. They're very opportunistic predators. A bear cub's no different. Now, this is something that you guys just have to trust me. All the bear biologists now are in agreement that these bears are not doing this to bring the female back into estrus. That's not true. And the reason why it kind of seems like that should be the case is because lions and wolves will do that. They do infanticide when you have an alpha male wolf or a lion, and you have a new alpha male that takes over the pride or the pack. Well, you don't want to spend a lot of your own resources raising the young from the old alpha male. So you want to just kill everybody, and it's brutal, but it's nature, and start over with your own offspring. And genetically, for evolution, that's a better strategy to be more successful. But bears aren't like that. They don't have a pride. They don't have a pack. And if a male bear, but actually, to be honest, we have seen just as many female bears go after, let's say, abandoned cubs or vulnerable cubs and eat them as we have males. So really, and anybody that's spent a lot of time with bears will tell you that. And that behavior, where they do try to go after the cubs, is much more increased, and that during periods of food shortage. So really, it's just a food thing. Let's say that it was mating season, and the female had cubs and the male killed them all. Will she go back into estrus? Well, she will if it was done early enough, but only after about 2 weeks. There's no telling that bear that did that is going to 2 weeks later earn the reward of being able to mate with her exclusively. So there's no evolutionary force driving that behavior. But what does make sense is bears eat what's small and runs away from them, whether it's a fish, whether it's anything. That's what it is. So that's why infanticide happens. It's not to bring the female back into estrus. So this picture shows there was a cub that had kind of wandered too far away from mom, and mom was busy fishing. And so this bear just sees this cub running away and just has to catch it, just like rolling a ball in front of a cat. And they're just a predator. They have to chase it, catch it. But this comes with a good ending, so don't worry. But this bear caught this cub and was just getting ready to kill it. And here comes mom. And the cub was fine. So yeah, so you don't want to mess with the mother bear. She is absolutely fearless, and she chased that bear down, didn't catch it, but that bear never tried that thing again because the mom was super angry. So bears basically, especially the grizzlies, and I'll tell why in the next slide, have this defensive behavior that really is more intense, I believe, more intense than any mother protective instinct in nature. And they will fight to the death if they have to. There's no zero fear. Doesn't matter how big, much bigger that other bear is. Like this picture here, it looks almost like it's a mother playing with a cub. That's a female bear that is going right after a bear, a big male that was chasing her cubs. That big male might even be 3 times heavier than her, at least twice, but maybe 3 times. So they have no fear. And so that really is most intense. Bears are the most intense of animals that I've come across. And then the grizzlies and brown bears are the same species. They're the most intense of all the bears for this. Like a black bear, for instance, where the black bear kind of gets rid of the dangers of cubs, is she'll stay in a forested area. That's where they evolved, in the forest. They have claws specially designed to climb trees. So whenever a threat happens, those cubs are trained to just run up a tree, get out on a branch, and they can outclimb pretty much anything big and strong enough to hurt them, because they can climb out on smaller branches. And mom, if it's a really dangerous predator that's coming up to the tree, she actually, a black bear, will leave and come back later, rather than try to fight and maybe get hurt, because she knows those cubs are up on a tree. But if you look at a grizzly, they evolved, really evolved in a treeless landscape. There's no trees, so how would they be able to survive? Such as during the Pleistocene, you'll see the Pleistocene there's no trees and full of animals that were bigger and stronger than grizzly bears. So how could they ever have survived? Even though this bear is not a grizzly, this is a short-faced bear. Look how big that guy is. He's a monster. And he was specialized in chasing down ungulates, hoofed mammals. And you had the Smilodon, or saber-toothed cat. You had the dire wolf, which is like a giant version of our wolf. So how did the grizzly really ever be able to have cubs when all these bigger, stronger animals were going after them? And really it's because of this sort of psychotic nature of them. It's like, well, I'm smaller than you and we'll probably lose the fight, but it's going to really hurt. So it's probably better, you probably don't want to mess with me. And that's where that instinct of the mother grizzly came from. And also, just to show you on a side note, the other reason why the grizzlies survived that period and other animals during climate change events went extinct is the grizzly is a digging animal. So if you look at the brown bear grizzly, they have this big hump. Well, what that is it's an enlarged scapula or shoulder blade bone, which attaches lots of muscle. So it enables them to be incredible diggers. Also, they have evolved these really, really long claws, which are like spades. They're not specialized for climbing trees like a black bear. They're specialized for digging. So these guys were able to dig for different roots that other animals couldn't get to. They could dig for fossorial or ground-dwelling mammals like ground squirrels and stuff. Those other predators couldn't do that. So that's how the brown bear was just more adaptable during that period, because of this digging behavior. And then the mother's fierce spirit. So other bears have different ways of kind of protecting their cubs as well. And you'll see the picture of the brown bear with a cub on the top. They will sometimes climb up there because the cubs think it's fun, but usually mom will just shake them off. But the brown bears, the grizzlies, they don't like the cubs riding around. But the sloth bear down here that we talked about earlier, whenever they travel with the cubs, it's always on the back. And that's probably because they evolved in tiger country. We have tigers and leopards. And if you've got your cubs trailing in the back and all that kind of undergrowth, and you've got big cats that are so fast, I don't think they'd ever be able to have a cub. So they just ride on mom's back. And I think that the sloth bear, I've seen some videos and stuff of sloth bears defending their cubs against tigers. They will easily equal a female grizzly in their ferocity. Okay, so now let's talk about mating season. We talked about when it happens. It happens in the springtime when there's not much great food around for the bears, and so they have time to be able to mate. So the females will come into estrus. So for these brown bears, it's in June. For about each female will come into estrus at a different time between, well, middle of May to the middle of July. Sometime during that window, each female will come into estrus for 2 weeks. So different females are at different estrus stages during that period. During that period, each female bear will have a 2 to 3 day peak window of peak estrus, where she is most receptive and also most attractive to the males. and so then they get together and then they mate. And this mating can actually take place up to 45 minutes at a time. Now, they will just, because the male bear wants to make sure that he has the most chance to fertilize her eggs, and so they will mate lots and lots and lots of times during that 45-minute period before they separate. So bears will keep their cubs for several years. For black bears, it's 1.5 years. Most bears, it's 2 years, but these brown bears, it's up to 4 years. And so there's not that many single females available for all these willing males, because you've got, like for the brown bears, I mean, you've got mothers with, first summer cubs, second summer cubs, third summer cub, even some fourth summer cubs. So they're not available to mate. They do not mate unless they've gotten rid of their cubs. So what that causes is a tremendous amount of competition. Just too many single guys, not enough single girls. And this competition's amazing. But as I'll show you in a video in a minute, and I'll tell Lee when to play that, not yet. These fights over the females can be very devastating physically. I mean, there's serious fights and there's a lot of injuries. And so the bears do not want to fight unless they know that they stand a good chance. So what they do is they have lots of complex behaviors in order to try to intimidate other males and communicate with peeing, with different body language, so that they can decide who's tougher and who deserves that female without actually having to fight. And they'll do a lot of this indirectly. So the way bears spread their scent is through their urine. And that's kind of their individual scent. There's their signature, that's their status. So the big males will pee a lot and then roll around in it. So they have urine around on them. And then they want to intimidate other bears in the area without even seeing them. And we call this communicating by P-mail. So they'll take, like, this is a great picture by Eddie Savage of a bear marking his scent on a tree. And so what he does is he will rub that scent all around so other bears can smell that certain tree and say, oh, that guy, yeah, I met him last year. I don't have any business trying to get into a fight with him again. So there's ways to avoid some of this conflict, which is pretty cool. And I don't have a good picture of it, but what the bears will also do is they'll actually do damage to the tree. They'll bite it, they'll scratch it, and they'll reach up as high as they can to show bears how big they are. Now, the picture to the right is kind of interesting. This is a giant panda. Well, pandas want to do the same thing. They want to put their mark as high as they can, but a panda has a scent gland called the anourogenital gland, where it will spray scent. Other bears don't do this, like a cat or a dog will spray this certain scent. It's not just based on urine. So what they do, because they're spraying it out from below their tail, they will actually do a handstand and walk up as high as they can up a tree to spray, so other pandas can say, wow, that's a big guy. I think I'm going to go to the next valley and look for females. So these battles, which I'll show you a video in a minute, that's why bears are so sexually dimorphic, which means the difference between males and females physically is a lot. So for the brown bears, polar bears, the males are twice as big, sometimes even more than a mature female. So look at this guy on the right. He's like muscle bound. Does he need that muscle in order to graze on coastal sedges, catch salmon? No, he doesn't need that. He does that because the biggest, strongest bear can fight to have the most females, and so that's just evolution working. And the female is the one on the left. So that's a typical huge male and a typical big, healthy adult female bear. So look at the difference. They look like different species. Here's another example. The males are just built for combat. So just look at the body proportions. So when I'm out guiding bears, I can say, oh yeah, there's a female, and they're like, how can you tell? Well, look at the proportions, the body proportions. Look how short this female's neck is in proportion to the rest of her body. Shorter legs in proportion to the rest of the body. And a larger rear end area in relation to the shoulders, which are not as muscularly well developed. The female bears actually are more efficiently built for gathering calories, hunting, fishing, getting berries. The males are overbuilt, but they have to be, because if you're not overbuilt male, you're not going to be able to compete for the females and reproduce. Here's another kind of example, just as we're going into the differences between females and males. So again, the male, super muscular shoulders, super thick and very long neck in relation to the rest of the body compared to the female. Actually a small head in relation to the rest of the body. I mean, the skulls are massive, but in relation to the rest of the body, the head, the neck, the legs, and also the rear end are much smaller than the female in relation to the rest of the body. And if you can't tell, because it's maybe not a well-mature bear, or it's a young bear, it hasn't gotten those what we call secondary sexual characteristics developed yet, you just wait till they pee, and that's what it looks like when a female pees. And the subadult polar bears can be difficult to tell the males from the females. So what your guide will do in Churchill is he will look for this little tiny hair here. Those are the pubic hairs of the female, and there's usually oftentimes kind of a dark urine stain. And so even a young bear, you can tell a male from a female. Okay, Lee, I'm going to show a video, and then I'm going to try to narrate through the video. So what this shows is the male bears communicating indirectly by using their scent marking, and like we saw. Okay, yeah, let's go ahead and convert over, and I'll just narrate. Okay, so I'm just gonna, this bear is rolling around on a log, and so instead of there being a marking tree, he just picked a log to roll around on, and so that specific log, every bear that walks through that area every big male will go to that log and basically see which bears have checked in to that spot, and then they will smell, oh man, that guy's huge. He's way bigger than me. I'm gonna have to go somewhere else. So that's a way for them to avoid these kind of dangerous conflicts. And then the next, this was with a GoPro that I put by the log. And then the next one is I saw a bear following a female and following her trail. Like I could see where she'd walked in the grass, and he was peeing a lot, putting his scent down on her tracks to show. So what I did is I just put the GoPro and left right between her trail, and then you'll see him sort of cowboy walk over. Where are we at in the video now, Lee?
He is walking around the log and marking.
Okay. So you see this behavior here is called the cowboy. Yeah. So these are two big males that are competing with each other, and so what's happening here is doing what's called the cowboy walk, and they're swinging their hips, and it looks kind of like their macho walk, but really what they're doing is they're swinging their hips so that their penis flops back and forth while they're peeing to get it on their feet, so that they can stomp on the tracks of the other male. That's called the cowboy walk. It's kind of a cool thing. Now, if these ways of indirectly communicating and intimidating each other don't work and either bear backs down, then we're going to show a typical mating season bear fight.
You got it figured out?
Yeah.
Are they fighting,
We're
Lee?
seeing those now. Yeah, they are. We're on to the second clip of them fighting.
Yeah. So you'll notice what they're basically trying to do. These are two big males, and they're trying to grapple and throw the other male onto its back and pin him down. And usually when that happens, almost always the bear that got thrown down basically says, okay, you won the fight fair and square. She's yours, or this meadow's yours. So, but where the real damage comes in is you see them biting each other around the face. They can get their ears torn off. They can get their jaws broken. So these are some like very violent, high-speed, heavy-duty fights. Yeah, so this is the kind of damage done through these mating season fights. So you see, these bears don't want to fight unless they really know they stand a good chance of winning. So there can be some pretty serious damage done, such as this jaw, basically. This is called a snaggletooth condition. And I've seen a number of polar bears with snaggletooth. I've seen a lot of brown bears with snaggletooth. So I'll show you kind of what happens. This is in the Kodiak Museum of a snaggletooth bear. Well, that long lower canine tooth is much stronger, is very, very thick and solid and much stronger than actually the bone that surrounds it and holds it in place. So basically they didn't have an orthopedic surgeon to go in there and kind of redo it and then have it heal back the right way. It just sort of, the bone will fuse back together in the position where the injury happened. So this is basically like permanent. So anyway, this is just one of the more common injuries that these bears will get when they lock jaws and try to throw each other down. So we've mentioned that the bears will try to avoid this confrontation using all these complex scent markings and cowboy walking behavior and this kind of stuff. Well, one of the other adaptations, and also the male bears are sort of adapted to be much bigger in order to fight. Well, the other thing that they do is they have a natural tendency, probably more than other animals even, to play. And they play fight, and that's how they learn how to use their body against another bear. So when you, like I used to wrestle in high school, and so I knew I could look at a guy and I could tell, do I stand a chance against him? And that's how, when you know your body's ability and you've practiced a lot, starting from the age of cubs, like these third summer cubs, then you know who you can risk to stand up against and who you can't. And all these skills are really important. And so I'll talk more about bear sparring for polar bears, which is really special behavior, next week. But the sparring behavior is very costly, takes a lot of energy, but really for your success as a male in order to compete for these females in this competitive environment, it's really worth your time to practice your skills, to get to know how strong you are before you pick a fight with a bear that might break your jaw. And also, like in Churchill, these guys are just play fighting because it's not mating season in the fall, but they'll remember each other. Like even though they're not hurting each other here, the bears know who's bigger and stronger. And so that can help them avoid getting injured on these mating season fights. And so, yeah, all the bears really do this sparring behavior, which is fantastically fun for us to watch when we're watching bears. Yes, bears like to have fun, and this is fun. Animals like to play, but even at the adult stages, bears will do this because it's very important for their success. Okay, I think I'm actually wrapping up here. So I just wanted to, you guys are all interested in bears. I just wanted to once again tell you to please take some time and interest in our battle against the proposed Pebble Mine, which would be the largest open pit gold mine in the world at the headwaters of the Bristol Bay Salmon Run, and which supports, well, the most amazing salmon run on earth, also all these amazing bears in Western Alaska. So we just can't afford to do it. We cannot afford to do it. It's not worth the price, guys. So your senators need to know that putting this mine in is not a way to make America great again. It's a foreign mining company. The Army Corps of Engineers there's some corruption or something going on. They haven't done proper assessments. Our EPA is not right now, and this is going to be permanent damage to one of the world's great nature jewels. So if you want to learn more about that, we've already done an amazing webinar. What I did, Drew and Cook Inlet Keeper did a film called Pebble Redux, and you can see the recorded version. But I love this quote. I mean, this is the EPA's Bristol Bay Watershed Assessment, the old EPA. This pebble deposit at any of the sizes that they're proposing, even the smallest, could result in a significant, unacceptable adverse effect on the ecological important streams, wetlands, lakes. So get on to go follow Drew Hamilton. He is the champion of the anti-pebble mine fight. He's the president of friendsofmcneilriver.org. So you can go in and read more about it, and he's lined out everything about how you can help, different addresses, different ways you can show your support. So Drew's a hero, and we're just all trying to support Drew and all our bear lovers' mission into stopping this thing before it happens. And NatHab has been fantastic, giving us their big platform for us to help us fight. And if you like bears, I'll just there's my Instagram site. I've got pictures from bears all over the world: polar bears, pandas, brown bears. So right up there, Brad Joseph's photos. And I want to give a shout out to Eddie Savage. He's the one that took the picture of the bear scratching on the trees. Got fantastic bear pictures. He also guides in Churchill in the summer and the fall. He guides brown bears in British Columbia. He's our China guide, so he's got great pictures of moon bears in the wild, also pandas. So if you're looking for cool wildlife pictures and you want to support and become the following of bear lovers, Eddie Savage BC is a great one. And then of course there's Drew Hamilton, Drew H. So if you want bears, there's no shortage of bears. So the more you support and the more you like those pictures and the more following that we all guys like us and girls get, it's just going to help our cause. We just got to keep fighting because bears are too dang cool. You can go to my YouTube channel if you want some bear fights. I've got lots of bear fights and different bear footage and stuff like that. And yeah, well, I'm impressed. I have 10 minutes for questions. So I think we've basically held all of our almost 600 people are still logged in. So I guess I didn't mess it up too bad. So thanks, guys. Any questions?
Yeah, we've got some great questions. You never mess it up, Brad. It's always perfect. So I'm glad we've got time for questions, and I'll just jump right into them. This question says, why has synthetic bear bile not replaced natural bear bile? Is synthetic bear bile more expensive?
No, it's not more expensive. The most expensive is the wild bear bile. That's a great question, by the way. And so it's just the consumers with the traditional Asian medicine market. And I'm not going to say it's only Chinese. In fact, a lot of Chinese, a vast proportion of the Chinese people don't like this stuff. But it is the Southern Chinese mostly. It's also Vietnamese, Korean, Cambodian, Thai, even some Malaysian. So it's not just Chinese, but it's Asian market. So there is no reason why people can't just go ahead and use the synthetic stuff. It's just this assumption that the wild stuff is going to be more pure, which is ridiculous. And the stuff from the bear farms, which originally was set up by the Chinese government for two reasons. One of them obviously is to make money, but what they say is we wanted to take pressure off the wild bears before they went extinct. So we're going to set up these bear farms. Well, the bear farms are horrifically cruel. It's like the worst thing humans do to an animal in nature is to have these bears in these cages. And that stuff is cheap, but because there's so many bear farms, but they're trying to phase it out. We're all trying to phase it out. But the thing is the bile from the bear farms is gross. It's filled with blood and pus, and they get lots of cancer because there's catheters in there. And so a lot of people kind of know the bear farms are gross now. So it's either the synthetic stuff that they don't believe is great as the wild stuff. And so unfortunately, the bear farming didn't actually help the wild bear populations like it could have by flooding the market with cheaper stuff. What it did is it just got more consumers using it, and then so the price for the wild pure stuff even went even higher. So it's just bad all around. And really, but one of the biggest consumers and uses of this is actually for basically male performance after they've been drinking too much. That's just it's true, and it has nothing to do with the true medicinal aspects of what this bile does. But for some reason, that's just like, well, bears are strong, so. And what happens when you mix alcohol and bear bile is it can actually destroy your liver. Your liver can take one or the other, but the combination of the two can destroy the liver. And so there's a lot of Chinese doctors that are now coming out and saying, guys, if you do this, you could ruin your liver. So anyway, that's enough. But good question, guys.
Wow. That's a lot to sink in and settle in and really think about. Thank you for going into detail about that. I think it's important information to share. Okay, next question. Do female bears mate solely with one male bear? And do male bears mate with more than one female?
Oh, good question. You know, I think I skipped over that part when I was supposed to talk about it. No, when the females are in estrus in their peak, they become very promiscuous, and the record I saw one older female bear that was in her peak estrus mate with 9 different males in one day. So, and then the males will mate with many, many different females. So what happens is a big male will find a female, and then they'll get to like each other, and they will stay together until one of two things happens. A bigger bear steals her from him through this intimidation or fighting, or the female decides that she sees a bigger, stronger male that's more attractive, and she'll actually go pursue him. So what happens is a female during her estrus period, she will get her eggs will be fertilized during this 3 to 4 day period, which is her peak estrus of her 2-week cycle where she's in estrus. It's 3 or 4 days. Whoever mates with her in those couple of days is gonna be the fertilizer and be the father. But she, like I said, can be 10 different males or 30 different males during this period of days. So what happens is the cubs can all have different fathers. Okay.
What's the maximum number of cubs you've seen born, Brad?
4 is the maximum. I think black bears have had maybe a couple times have been more, but four I've only seen 2 times in the wild, and the 4th one never really lasts very long. It's just too much for the mom to take care of. The average among most bears is 2, except like I'll talk about the Churchill polar bears that are suffering from climate change. They almost always just have 1. I'm sorry. No, their average is just under 2. But yeah, a lot of these bears, the brown bears, have 3. Every once in a while 4. But like Churchill polar bears, I've only one time in my life seen a mom with 3 cubs at the end of the summer.
Okay, thank you. Speaking of fighting, I have a couple of questions about that. Do the males ever die from wound infection after a fight?
Oh, that's a great question. They could die because their jaws were so messed up. Like if they really break their jaw bad and they can't feed, or they break their teeth off, it can shorten their lifespan. But bears are very, very tough at dealing with wounds, and they don't really get infected. Their immune system is set up to where they can get a tremendously bad cut. I mean, if I got bit by a bear in the leg and I was camping out in Katmai for months, it would become septic and I would die of infection, but bears don't get that. And I'm not exactly sure. It's just a super hyped up immune system that resists infection, something that they evolved from having to have wounds a lot and survive. Good question.
Yeah, and so my follow-up was about whether Snaggletoothbear can feed normally. So it sounds like that could be life-threatening just due to the fact that they can't feed. But I imagine you do see Snaggletoothbear out there living and feeding.
Yeah, that snaggletooth condition. I mean, I've seen bears that lived for 10 years with a snaggletooth, and they're able to deal with it. It's not optimal, but they can handle it. Bears are super tough.
Okay. Another question for you. Back to the bear bile. What was the name of that organization fighting the bear bile?
Oh yeah, I should have put it up. Animals Asia.
Okay, Animals Asia. Okay, I'll type that in for everybody. All right, I'm going to stop there. I think you wanted to poll the audience and ask a few questions, and you had some follow-up. So I'm going to pass it back to you, Brad, for closing comments.
Great. Thank you, guys. As I said before, my first webinar that I did on this series was Why Do We Love Bears So Much? So you can go and watch that recorded version. And then I just talk about why are bears so charismatic. So, and then also what I mentioned was explained is that if we decide we love bears, we want to conserve them, we're going to have to conserve all these great habitats. So bears are really a great animal for us all to kind of form a love about. So I just really appreciate being able to go into a little bit more of the deeper biology and some of the other bears in the world. If you have any questions, yeah, go ahead. What I'm going to do is do a blog post on my www.alaskabearsandwolves.com blog that I do for Natural Habitat, and I will answer all the questions, and that will be my blog post so everybody can see the questions and then my answers. And also, if you guys are still listening, it's really important. We want to know what you guys want to hear about. So just right now, put in the comments, what would you like to hear about next? Like, we had a bunch of people wanted to know more about Churchill polar bears, and so I'm going to do one on the life of a year in the life of a Churchill polar bear and their life cycle, which is fascinating. I'll do that next week. That's because of requests. And a couple ideas that I kind of thought maybe you guys might want to hear, but if you ask for them, I'll do it. One of them is the weasel family, with maybe the star being the wolverine, but also including the sea otter and the badger, the honey badger, the skunk. So there's really super cool family of animals that a lot of people don't know so much about, but I love. The other one that I was thinking about doing is, a lot of people don't realize that ravens have a really strong relationship with top predators like bears and wolves, and I could do a presentation on that. So so those are just two examples. You ask for those, I'll do them. Thank you guys, I really appreciate it. Especially give a little shout out to all the kids out there that are taking an hour to learn about stuff that probably isn't covered in their normal school curriculum. So everybody, just remember that we are going to get through this whole period. We'll just come out stronger, and there's been great ways for the guides to use these webinars and other social media to just educate people that are stuck at home on nature and really crave nature. So thank you guys.
All right. My thanks as well. We'll get the replay out to all of you. And if you attended either of our webinars on Monday or Tuesday, those replays are going out this afternoon. Otherwise, you'll find them all on our Daily Dose of Nature page on our website, which is linked right at the top of the page. So we encourage you to mosey over there and look and see what we've got, and also look at the other topics we have coming up. So tomorrow we have a topic. We're going to be talking about Alaska, and then on Friday we are going to be talking about the bison of Yellowstone. So we hope to see you at one of those, but for now we'll say good day and conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody.